Today's daf is Yevamos daf Yud, and we are 2 lines from the top of daf Yud Amud Aleph. Rav Ada Karchina Kamei de Rav Kahana Omar Mishnei de Rav. Today's daf is being learned as a schus refuah shalema for Vadia ben Miriam Leah, Moshe Abba ben Devora, Devora bas Mecha, Shmuel ben Tehila, Elazar Lipa Shalom ben Fega Rachel, Sarah Nechama bas Rus Malka, Baruch ben Rachel, Malka Miriam bas Esther, Michael ben Chaya Fega, and Esther Kreindel bas Devora. So we're in the middle of a sugya. Specifically, the first sugya of the Masechta, which deals with the halacha that an erva or a tzaras erva or a tzaras erva that falls the yibum, there's no chalitza and there's no yibum. And the Mishnah mentioned 15 examples of arayos that can fall the yibum where the halacha of the Mishnah would apply. And the Gemara says on Daf Tes Amud Aleph, Amalei Levi l'Rebbe. Levi asked Rebbe a question. Why is it only Chamesh Esrei Nashim? Why are there only 15 arayas that are pater min achalitza min ayibum and have the halacha that they pater b'tzara and the tzara sara? Lisni tezayin. There should have been a 16th erva. Meaning Levi felt there was one erva that could have been mentioned in the Mishnah that was not mentioned. What was that erva? It was the erva of Anusas Aviv. The Mishnah should have mentioned that in the event that Ruvain is married to Shimon's mother, however, the relationship between Ruvain's father, who's also Shimon's father, and Shimon's mother was not that they were ever married, but rather the father was Ma'anes, Shimon's mother. Then Ruvain married her. Ruvain died. L'chura, the halacha is that being that this woman is Shimon's mother, Imai, she's an erva, and you would have the halachos of the Mishnah. So Levi asked Rebbe that why is it Chamesh Esrei Nashim, listening Tezayin, there's a 16th erva that could have been mentioned in the Mishnah, and that's the Mishnah of Anusas Aviv. And when Rebbe heard this question, instead of saying Geshmak Kasha, or instead of simply answering the question, Rebbe reacted. He said, from the way you're asking this question, it sounds like literally you have no seichel. And the Gemara went on a long discussion. We've seen only the first part of it to try to understand why Rebbe reacted so viscerally to this question that Levi asked. In fact, at first glance, it would seem to be a very good question. And not only did Rebbe not like the question, but so the Gemara said, first attempt, that maybe the reason Rebbe didn't like this question is because at the end of the day, the only way it's possible to have a case that Ruvain would be married to Shimon's mother where the father was ma'anes, the mother, so that it was through the anusa that Shimon was born, is according to the Chachamim that hold noisei adam anusas aviv. However, according to Rabbi Yehuda, that holds that a man's not allowed to marry anusas aviv, so it would be impossible for Ruvain to be married to this woman, because this woman, who's Shimon's mother, is a woman that his own father was ma'anes, thus she's anusas aviv. According to Rabbi Yehuda, ein adam noisei anusas aviv. So says the Gemara, you want to know why Rebbe didn't like the question? It's because Rebbe held that to mention an erva that's beplukta, that's really totally in a machlokes tanoim, machlokes Rabbi Yehuda and the Chachamim, is not something that he wanted to do. So all 15 arayos that were mentioned in the Mishnah is arayos that everybody, every single Tana in the entire Shas agrees with. There's one that enochanami could work according to some shittas, but it wouldn't work according to all shittas. Thus, it's totally in the machlokes ubeflukta loikamayri. And then the Gemara got fun. Says the Gemara, is that true? Ubeflukta loikamayri. You tell me that every single erva that's mentioned in the Mishnah is an erva aliba de kuli alma. It's not true. Why is it not true? Because Reb Chia taught something in a brisa, and from Reb Chia taught in the brisa, it's clear that he learned our Mishnah on Amud Beis afilu beflukta. So what was Reb Chia's brisa? So we'll have to recap it very, very briefly. It takes us to the Mishnah in the beginning of Parak Arba'achim, where the Mishnah discusses there were 4 brothers, Ruvain, Shimon, Levi, and Yehuda. 2 of the brothers, Ruvain and Shimon, were married to sisters. Ruvain and Shimon both died, so now the 2 sisters fell in Yibum to Levi and Yehuda. The halacha is that Levi and Yehuda are not allowed to do Yibum with any one of the sisters. The reason is because there's a halacha of Zika, specifically Achoisku Kasai, thus Midrabanan, Levi and Yehuda cannot do Yibum with any of the two Yevamos. What do? They do Chalitza. And that's the halacha in the Mishnah. The Mishnah says because of Achayis Kuka, the two Yevams, Levi and Yehuda, are going to do Chalitza. They're not going to do Yibum. Stating that, the Mishnah said, what would be if one of the sisters was an erva to one of the brothers? So then the halacha is that brother would be able to do yibum with the other sister. Why? Because now the other sister is not achayis kukasai. It's because the erva doesn't fall yibum. If she doesn't fall yibum, there's no zika, which means that her sister, the other yevama, is not achayis kukasai. Said the Mishnah, what would be if, again, two brothers were married to sisters, they died, and now the two yevamas fall to two brothers. One of the Yevamis was an erva to one of the brothers, and the other Yevama was an erva to the other brother. Says the Mishnah, in that case, each one of the Yevamin would be able to do Yibum to the other sister. Meaning, they can't be miyabim the one that's an erva, but they'd be able to be miyabim the other one. In fact, the Mishnah says that that's what the Mishnah meant, an earlier Mishnah. A Mishnah in the second parak, on the Amud Aleph, when it said, it was referring to this exact case, where you have two sisters that fall yibum. One of the sisters is an erva. Then achoisa, the erva's sister. If you want to do yibum, you could do yibum. You want to do chalitza, you'd be able to do chalitza. But the punchline of this whole Mishnah that we need is that the Mishnah said that in the event that the two sisters that are falling the yibum were also ervas to the two brothers, one was an erva to one and the other was an erva to the other, same erva, then the halacha would be that Muteris lazeh, asur lazeh, and asur lazeh, muteris lazeh, meaning each one of the brothers would be able to be miyabim, the other Yevama, there would be no problem. So far, so good. Enter Reb Chia. Reb Chia, who was a Talmud Movik of Rabbeinu HaKadosh, said that when the Mishnah said that in the event that these two Yevamas, these two sisters, were also ervas to the two brothers, it's true for all 15 arayas mentioned in the Mishnah. And the truth is, it was Machlokes Amiram, whether he really meant all 15. Machlokes Abaya and Rav Safra and other Amiram, but Rav Safra, anyways, held that it's true for all 15 arayas. All 15 arayas of the Mishnah, you can say that in the event that there were two sisters, and one was an erva to one was an erva to one, which erva? Bitoi, Bas Bitoi, Bas Bina, Bas Ishtoi, Bas Bina, Bas Bina. Go through all 15 arayas. It's going to work. Freik the Gemara, that the truth is that it works for all 15. However, there's one knech. Eishes Achshloi Hoya Ba'ilamai only works according to Reb Shimon, who says that if the brother was born after the Yibum, then there's no Eishes Ach Shelo Hoya Ba'olam. However, if you hold like the Chachamim, that even in that case, it's going to be Eishes Ach Shelo Hoya Ba'olam, there's no way to make that Mishnah work. Why? That was yesterday's stuff. That we're not chazering. Ayin Shah. But that's something that the Gemara came and said factually, that it only works according to Reb Shimon. Now, if Reb Chia said that Bekulan Ani Koyrbem, you can plug and play the entire Mishnah on that base into the Mishnah later in the beginning of Perek Arba Achim, and one of them is Eishes Ach Shelo Hoya Ba'olam, and Eishes Ach Shelo Hoya Ba'olam only works according to Reb Shimon, that means he's learning the Mishnah as Eishes Ach Shelo Hoya Ba'olam. I'll leave it to Reb Shimon. That's Beplukta Kamayri. It's afraid to Gemara. How could you tell me? How could it be that the reason Rebbe reacted the way he did to Levi's kasha, when Levi asked what seemed to be a nice kishmaka kasha, then why did the Mishnah mention the 16th erva, mention and Rusas of it? And the reason was, says the Gemara, because he held out also beplukta, who beplukta like kamari. It's not true. You see beplukta kamari. Eishes Ach Shelo Hoya Ba'olam is beplukta kamari. What are you going to tell me? No, Eishes Ach Shelo Hoya Ba'olam is true according to everybody. It's just machlokes when you say Eishes Ach Shelo Hoya Ba'olam. That's true. But the way Reb Chia applied the Mishnah on that base, in the Mishnah Perek Arba Achim, clearly he was learning the Mishnah Dafka Libed Rav Shimon. So you see, it's beplukta kamari. So if it's beplukta kamari, it's beplukta kamari. What's the Gemara's kasha? And the Gemara answered, and this was really the first teretz of the Gemara. Elul Rebbe Hani Klalu Lasley. Who says Rebbe agrees with everything that Reb Chia said? It was Reb Chia Shtickle Torah, and you're right. Reb Chia was applying the Mishnah to the Mishnah in Arba Achim, and the way he applied the Mishnah, it would mean that Eishes Ach Shelo Hoya Ba'olam only works to leave it to Rav Shimon. But no one says that Rebbe ever agreed with this. Rebbe's not the one who said it. Reb Chia is the one that said it. Had Rebbe said it, so it would be Rebbe L'Shitasa is Beplukta Kamari. But Reb Chia said it. Talmud of Rebbe, but Nish Rebbe, and because Rebbe himself didn't say it, Rebbe is not meshubah to this whole shtickle Torah. So Rebbe Kishalatzma told Levi, why getting involved in beplukta? What do you mean Reb Chia did? That was Reb Chia. This is Rebbe. Who said Rebbe holds of that whole cloud? Rebbe is never the one. It's not the one that made the statement, and therefore it's not a kasha. That is the first explanation for why Rebbe did not like the question that Levi asked. It's because it's beplukta. It's telling the machlokes Rabbi Yehuda and the Chachamim ubeplukta loy kamari. Next teretz of Addo Karchina Kamei Rav Kahana B'Shmei Rav Addo Karchina said in the presence of Rav Kahana, and he said in the name of the great Amud Rav. He said Lo'ilum Mislei the Rebbe Hani Klal. Lo'ilum, I'll tell you that Rebbe maybe did hold of this call, meaning he agreed. He would have said exactly what Reb Chia said, and that is that all of the 15 arayos mentioned in our Mishnah could be applied to the Mishnah in the beginning of Perek Arba'achim. Now, if that's the case, then you see the Plukta Kamairi. So if you see the Plukta Kamairi, so why did Rebbe have a problem with Levi's question? Why didn't the Mishnah mention Anusas Aved? Because it's the Plukta, it's telling the Machlokes Rabbi Yehuda and the Chachamim. The Mishnah mentioned which is also telling the Machlokes Reb Shimon and the Chachamim. So the Gemara says, you want to know why Rebbe had a question? It's precisely, this is a 180, it's precisely because he held of the klal. It's because he held of the klal, the Haki Kamale. He held that Imay Anusas Aved, the case of Imay Anusas Aved, the Chada Mishkachas Law, the Tartilon Mishkachas Law. It would be possible in one of the two scenarios in the Mishnah Perek Arba'achim, but it wouldn't be possible in both of the scenarios in Perek Arba'achim. In other words, we're doing an about face. Rebbe held the Reb Chia's klal. He held that all the arayos mentioned in the Mishnah have to be able to be applied to the Mishnah in the beginning of Perek Arba'achim. Because he held of the klal, that's why Rebbe could not include Anusas Aved. Because Anusas Aved, in contrast to the other 15 arayos that Rashi goes through in great detail on the Daf Tes days, could not be applied to that Mishnah over there. Because it would be impossible to have two brothers that are married to two sisters, where the two sisters are also arayos to the two other brothers, the two Yevamim, where the nature of the erva is imay, where one of the sisters is one of the brother's mother, and the other sister is the other brother's mother, albeit through Anusas Aved. It would be impossible. In fact, it's possible to have two brothers married to two sisters, that is half of Yevamis, and it's also possible for there to be two women that fall the yibum to two brothers, where the two women are ervas, and the erva is imay, where one is one's mother, one is the other mother. That's also possible. But for them to be sisters is not going to be possible. The reason it's not going to be possible because it's going to come out that each one of the two brothers that died, Reuven and Shimon, would have married their mother's sister. Right? That's what would have happened, because each one of these two brothers are sisters and are married to sisters, and the sisters are the two brothers' mother, and as a result, you can end up with a problem with achoisimoy, and achoisimoy is not something that's possible. So if you want to have a situation with two sisters, so that's possible, but where the two sisters are going to be arayos to the two brothers that are alive, that's not possible. Because again, you have two sisters that are falling to the two brothers. The issue is not on the Reuven and Shimon end. The issue is on the Levi and Yehuda end. Because if these two women, one is one person's mother and the other one's the other person's mother, and they're sisters, so what does that mean? Just put it on a piece of paper. It's very simple. That means one is married to one's mother's sister and the other is the other mother's sister. That's not a possibility. So it says the Gemara that it's for that reason. It's dafka for that reason. It's dafka because Rebbe held that all that rice mentioned in the Mishnah have to shtim with the Mishnah in Arba'achim. That it wasn't possible for us to mention Anusas Aved. Let's see it inside. Says the Gemara that being that Imay Anusas Aved b'chada mishkachas of Tartila mishkachas law. Why? Because Yaakov Beis Achoyes Anas, in the event that Yaakov was ma'anis two sisters, right? Because they're both Anusas Aviv, so he was ma'anis these two sisters. So then achoisa sheyevim the mishkachas law, that would be possible. And if the women that he was ma'anis were two nashim nachriyos, they're not sisters, then asur lazem muteros lazem mishkachas. So it's possible that one would be an erva to one and the other would be an erva to the other. But for it to be achoisa sheyevim, that wouldn't be possible. It's impossible for both of those two things to be true. As for that reason, it's dafka for that reason it wasn't mentioned. The Mishnah. Rashi says a third test. He says, the Rebbe Hani Klali. I'll tell you, Rebbe did not hold of the klal of Reb Chia. Okay, if he didn't hold of the klal of Reb Chia, he doesn't need the rice in the Mishnah to be able to shtim with the Mishnah in Perek Arba'achim, so that knocks out the second teretz of the Gemara. You can't tell me the reason he didn't want Anusas Aved mentioned in the Mishnah is because it's not going to be able to be applied to the Mishnah in Arba'achim because Hani Klali. and he has no problem mentioning things that are totally b'machloikis. That knocks out the first teretz of the Gemara. Can't tell me the reason we didn't mention Anusas Aviv is because it's totally machlokes Rabbi the Chachamim because he has no problem with that. Okay, so so why did Rebbe have a problem with Levi's kasha? Why did he say that? He held, and this is why he said it the way he said it. So sharp. Because he turned to Levi, he says, Levi, I understand. You don't learn the next Mishnah? Why do you learn the next Mishnah? What state in the next Mishnah? It's Mavur, the Masis Rabbi Yehuda, the Mishnah is Rabbi Yehuda, the Asab Anusas Aviv, who holds that a person is not allowed to marry Anusas Aviv. It says in the next Mishnah, there are 6 arayas that are more chomer than the 15 arayas mentioned in our Mishnah. And because these arayas can never be married to a person's brother, they could only be married to a stranger. So we say mutaris, the tzaras are mutar, because even though there's a lot of tzaras erba, but tzaras erba is only b'makom mitzvah. It's not shaloi b'makom mitzvah, as we saw so prominently on Daf Ches, and it's for that reason, says the Mishnah, these other arayis can't be mentioned. In other words, let's just speak this out again. The Mishnah mentioned 15 arayis. These are not the only 15 arayis in the Torah, right? If someone says, how many arayis are there? Oh, chameshes reinoshin. No, that's... That's exactly what Rebbe was saying. You have to learn the next Mishnah. The next Mishnah mentions another 6. There's really, and just here alone, we have 21 arayas. So there's for sure another 6. So how come those 6 weren't mentioned in our Mishnah? How come they were mentioned only over there? It's because what's unique about the 15 arayas in our Mishnah is these are 15 arayas where it's possible that they should be married to a person's brother. Where Reuven and Shimon are brothers, where Reuven would be able to be married to Shimon's erfa. Most cases, or in many cases, it won't even be possible. So because it won't be possible in many cases, so there are many arayos that can't be mentioned in our Mishnah. The next Mishnah mentions 6 such examples. Again, what are the examples? Imoy, a person's mother, ve'eshnes aviv, ve'achos aviv. That's the Gemara says, my Imoy. What did Imoy mean? Imoy mean the suas aviv. Does Imoy mean the suas aviv? Meaning, in the event that somebody is married to someone else's mother. So that's not possible to have in the case of Yibum, because Reuven can't be married to Shimon's mother. Why? Because if it's Shimon's mother, then it's either Reuven's mother, or even if it's not Reuven's mother, it's Reuven's father's wife, which is a problem. But if that's what Imoy means, then Hainu Eishes Aviv. The Mishnah already mentioned Eishes Aviv. The Mishnah mentions Imoy, and then the Mishnah mentions Eishes Aviv. If Imoy is Nesuas Aviv, that means it's Eishes Aviv. Eishes Aviv is mentioned as an independent derva. Elo Lav Anusas Aviv. Must be it's Anusas Aviv, right? Obviously. What's Imoy and Eishes Aviv? If Imoy is where it's Eishes Aviv, so then it's included in Eishes Aviv. So what's Imoy? Imoy must be when they're not married. Imoy must be when it's Anusas Aviv. So what did the Mishnah say? The Mishnah mentioned Anusas Aviv. It mentioned it in the next Mishnah. That it's only possible for Anusas Aviv to be married to an Acher. It's not possible for Anusas Aviv to be married to a brother. And that's why it's not mentioned in the Mishnah Daf Beis. That's why it's mentioned in the Mishnah Daf Yud Gimel. So Anusas Aviv, Levi's chap, he said, how can the Mishnah mention Anusas Aviv? Let's slow down. It was mentioned. It was actually mentioned in the next Mishnah. Now the Gemara says, who is the Tana that holds that Anusas Aviv can't be married to a person's brother? Meaning, who's the one that holds a person's not allowed to marry Anusas Aviv? It's Rabbi Yehuda, the Asab Anusas Aviv. That's why it wasn't mentioned in our Mishnah. And that's why Rebbe reacted the way he reacted. He said, he said, because Levi, I don't understand. You don't learn the next Mishnah? The next Mishnah mentions Anusas Aviv. Now, it never said the words Anusas Aviv. Had it said the words Anusas Aviv, there's no way Levi would have asked this question. But it said Imoy, and then it said Eishes Aviv, which implies that Imoy is not Eishes Aviv. So what's an Imoy that's not Eishes Aviv? It must be, it's an Anusas Aviv. So you have a case where Anusas Aviv just fell Yibum. And the Mishnah mentions it can't fall Yibum. And that's really why it's in the Mishnah Daf Yud Gimel. That's why it's not in the Mishnah on Daf Beis. So Levi asked the Kasha, how come the Mishnah Daf Beis didn't mention Anusas Aviv? That was Rebbe's time though. You want to know why he didn't mention it? That's the answer. The reason Rebbe said what he said, it's not because of the Plukta like Kamairi. It's not because Rebbe held of the Klal and Arba Achin and Anusas Aviv is not going to fit with that Klal. It's more Pashit. The reason he said it is because it's clear that the time of the Mishnah is Rabbi Yehuda, and the time of the Mishnah, if it's Rabbi Yehuda, holds that a person is not allowed to marry Anusas Aviv, so Reuven can't marry Imay Anusas Aviv Shel Shimon, and if that's the case, it's not possible for it to fall a Yibum. In fact, it's mefurish in a Mishnah and Daf Yigimel, which is why Rebbe said what he said, and that's the teretz. Says the Gemara, Amali Ravina Rav Ashi. We're not finished. Ravina told Rav Ashi, why is it true? Maybe this is really a kasha on the Mishnah and Daf Yigimel. Why is it true that Imay Anusas Ovid is not possible according to Rabbi Yehuda? The reason, presumably, it's not possible is because how's it if a person is not allowed to marry Anusas Aviv? So Reuven was not allowed to marry this woman. If he wasn't allowed to marry her, so the case of Yibum is never going to happen. But said Ravina, just because he wasn't allowed to marry her, doesn't mean he didn't marry her. And if he marries her, doesn't mean the Kedushin's not chal. So if that's the case, then it would be Shayach Yibum. In other words, even according to Rabbi Yehuda, Mishkachas lo di'i avar v'nosav, in the event that he went ahead and he married her, meaning, because even though Rabbi Yehuda holds that there's an erva called Anusas Aviv, this is important, but he holds that Anusas Aviv is not a chayvei krisis. All it is a chayvei lavin. And because all it is a chayvei lavin, and Kedushin is toifes b'chayvei lavin, in the event that a person would violate the Isser, Rabbi Yehuda's Isser, that one's not allowed to marry Anusas Aviv, he would get Malchus, but the Kedushin would be chal. So if the Kedushin would be chal, that means they're married. If they're married, if he dies, she falls liyibum. So what's this whole problem? Really, it's a kasha on the beginning of the sugya. It's a kasha on the end of the sugya. For some reason, we're saying you can't say Imay Anusas Aviv because Imay Anusas Aviv is not going to work according to Rabbi Yehuda. Why not? It will work according to Rabbi Yehuda. Even according to Rabbi Yehuda, it's possible in the event that Reuven married Anusas Aviv. He wasn't supposed to Enochanami, but it's very important to know the halacha. And it's important to know that at the end of the day, being that this woman, Reuven's Anusas Aviv, is Shimon's mother, so if she falls Liyibum to Shimon, she's going to be the Arba, she's going to pater at Tzara, So again, it's a kasha both on the first teretz of the Gemara. That the reason we didn't mention Anusas Aviv is because it's totally Machlokes Ravina the Chachamim. No, it's not. The Machlokes Ravina the Chachamim is whether you're allowed to do it, but certainly b'di'edet, if you do it, it's going to be okay. And it's a kash on the third teretz of the Gemara. Third teretz of the Gemara is oh no, the time of the Mishnah is Rabbi Yehuda, and because the time of the Mishnah is Rabbi Yehuda, we can't mention it. Even according to Rabbi Yehuda, we can mention it. And for the Gemara, the Ilai Katani, being that the only way it would work according to Rabbi Yehuda is the if the person went ahead and he violated, did something he wasn't allowed to do. He married a woman that he wasn't allowed to marry. So you want to tell me a halacha that's negay, a person that married a woman that he's not allowed to marry? Chas v'shalom, we're not talking about such a woman. It's the and the Ilai Katani. I'm the Rav Ashi Rav Kahana. So Rav Ashi told Rav Kahana, below the nami mishkachas law. It's actually possible even without a the. How so? Another Yevamos case. Yaakov Anas Kalas. What would be if Yaakov was Ma'anes, his daughter-in-law, and gave birth to a son? Umeis Reuven was Yaakov's son, whose wife was the daughter-in-law that Yaakov was Ma'anes. So Reuven then dies, without any children, so that now this Kalosai, who's Yaakov's daughter-in-law, who's Reuven's wife, who's also Shimon's mother, who's also Anusas Aviv, because Yaakov was Ma'anes, his daughter-in-law, that's when Shimon was born, is l'chayra not going to be able to fall a yibum. And being that she's aser, tzara nami asira, her tzara is also going to be aser. Meaning, the classic case of Anusas Aviv is where Reuven marries a woman that his father was Ma'anes, which according to Rabbi Yehuda is something he's not allowed to do. Lo yigala knaf aviv, it's a lo yisaseh. So the only way it's possible in Yevamos to have a situation where that kind of marriage is going to lead to Yibum is the and you can tell me the like Ketan, but that doesn't have to be the case. There could be a case where Reuven was married to his wife, and then Yaakov came, the Shver, and he was Ma'anes' daughter-in-law. So that now Reuven is married to, and by the way, had a child through that. The child was Shimon. So it comes out Reuven is married to his brother's wife, that's also Anusas Aviv. And he never did anything wrong. He didn't marry her when it was Anusas Aviv. What happened was, Yaakov was Ma'anes her. Now, they're allowed to stay married, they're not allowed to stay married. It's irrelevant to the story. Reuven died 5 minutes later. So if he's not alive anymore, so now, all of a sudden, this woman falls, Liyibum, to Shimon, and now you have a case of Imay Anusas Aviv who no one did anything wrong. So why are you telling me, according to Rabbi Yehuda, that's Mukhrach, that the only way it would be possible, Imay Anusas Aviv, is the like Katani? It's not true. It doesn't have to be that. Because it's possible, like the Gemara laid out a case where that's not going to be the case. So he told him, that's true. It's true. You found the case of Imay Anusa Sava that falls Yibum where no one did anything wrong. Yaakov was Ma'anas Kalasa. But at the same time, the man that died, Reuven, didn't do anything wrong. But at the same time, how did Reuven and Shimon become brothers? They became brothers through this Maises Nus. So the Gemara, the Mishnah is talking about brothers that became brothers in a regular way. The Mishnah is not talking about cases where brothers became brothers through such a situation, and it's for that reason, good reason, why the Mishnah wouldn't mention it. But the bottom line is, what was Levi's kasha? Why did the Mishnah mention Chamesh? It should have been 16. What's the 16? Where Shimon's mother falls liyibum. How was Reuven allowed to be married to Shimon's mother? Because it wasn't Reuven's mother, it wasn't Reuven's father's wife, it was just Anusas Aviv. And the Chachamim hold, Anusas Aviv. So you have a chetimtza where Reuven was able to be married to Shimon's mother. If Reuven dies below Banim, so now she falls liyibum. So you have the halach of the Mishnah. That was the Gemara's kasha. Rebbe heard the kasha, he said, the Gemara wasn't sure why, and the Gemara said 3 pshatim. The first pshat of the Gemara is because at the end of the day, this case is Toli Machlokes Rabbi Yehuda and the Chachamim, and beplukta loy kamarin. The second teretz of the Gemara is because Rebbe held of Reb Chia's klal that all that Rais mentioned in our Mishnah have to be able to be plugged into the Mishnah in the beginning of Perek Arba Achim, and all 15 can, Anusas Aviv can. And because it can't, that's dafka why Anusas Aviv wasn't mentioned in the Mishnah. The third teretz of the Gemara said that the reason that we didn't mention in our Mishnah the case of Anusas Aviv is because our Mishnah is Lehedya Rabbi Yehuda, who holds that a person is not allowed to marry Anusas Aviv. How do you know our Mishnah is Rabbi Yehuda? Where do you see in our Mishnah the Mishnah is Rabbi Yehuda? You don't see it in this Mishnah, but you see it in the Mishnah Daf Yud Gimel Amud Aleph. So we know the Tana of the Mishnah is Rabbi Yehuda, and you'll tell me, so what is Rabbi Yehuda? It's still possible. The like Katani, because the like Katani, that's why the Mishnah didn't mention Anusas Aviv. So the bottom line is Levi asked Rebbe a question. Rebbe clearly did not like the question. Says the Gemara, stating that we have a postscript, a very light postscript to this very intense Amud Aleph, and that is Afal Pikein Badka Levi b'Masnisan. Even though Rebbe did not like Levi's question, he held that Mimay Anusas Aviv should not be mentioned in the Mishnah. But when Rebbe himself sat down and he wrote his own Mishnah, his own Braisa, Rashi, he gia v'hoisifa li'imay Anusas Aviv b'Mishnasa. Levi's Mishnah, what was this? Levi had his own Mishnah, but Levi's Mishnah did have in it Imay Anusas Aviv. How do you know that? The Tani Levi, because this is what Levi's Mishnah said. Imay, a mother, pa'amim peiteres sarasa, upa'amim ene peiteres sarasa. Sometimes she patters a tzara, sometimes she doesn't patter a tzara. Okay, so what does that mean? Imay Nesuas Aviv. If the mother was Nesuas Aviv, was married to his father, v'nisnis la'achiv me Aviv, and then married his paternal brother, Umeis, and died, that's a case of Reuven, that's not going to pater the tzara. Why not? Because Reuven had no business marrying this woman. The Kedusha wasn't even taistis, because Reuven and Shimon are brothers. So if this woman is married to Shimon's father, that means she's also married to Reuven's father. So Reuven just married Eishes Aviv. Eishes Aviv is not a marriage. As a result, there's no Yibum, there's no tzara serve. But in the event that Shimon's mother was only Anusas Aviv, V'nisas la'achiv, and then she, the Anusas Aviv, of the Anusas Aviv married Achiv Me'aviv Umeis, and then the brother died, right? Reuven. So that's a case where you're going to have a Ptur and then Levi continued. Levi was mamish. He was very, very wordy. He didn't write this Balashim Ktsara like Rebbe wrote his Mishnah. He said that even though the Chacham said in their Mishnah, Chamesh Esrei Nashim, Yesh Lanu Lahoisif, Sheish Esrei Kigoyimzu. Couldn't have been more clear. So Rebbe said, Kimedum Ali Shein Loi Mayach Bekakadai. Zach the Gemara says this. The postscript is that Levi said, I hear. Of the Ma'aseh in Zayin Mishnah, he said Ba'arichos. He went through it, he fleshed it out. And he said clearly that Imay Anusas Aviv is going to be an erva. Zach the Gemara weiter. So the first part of today's daf and the second part of yesterday's daf, just to add a Yevamos Knech, were Levi's kasha that he asked Rebbe. That the Mishnah says Chamesh Esrei Nashim, Loitris are saying L'chayra have a 16th. What was the 16th? It should have said Imay Anusas Aviv. Daf Amud Beis. And into Daf Yud Aleph Amud Aleph, until we come to the Sugya of Tzara Saita, which is on the bottom of Daf Yud Aleph Amud Aleph, the Gemara is going to discuss another question that an Amora asked with regards to an erva that could have, would have, should have been mentioned in the Mishnah. The Amora that asked the question was Rish Lakish, The Amor that he asked the question to was Rabbi Yochanan. The question is really predicated on a halacha that requires a tiny bit of an introduction. And that is, Yevamos begins with Reuven and Shimon that are brothers. Reuven dies, he leaves over no children. The halacha is Shimon has a mitzvah of Yevamos Yaleh, and if he doesn't do Yibum, so then the halacha is he has a mitzvah of chalitza. Right? That's the basic halacha of Yibum and chalitza. What happens if one of the brothers does Yibum? So if one of the brothers does Yibum, so now it's over. The other brothers have nothing to do. One brother needs to do Yibum. What if when Reuven died, he left over 3 wives? It doesn't matter. One brother does Yibum with 1 wife. Now everything is over. What happens if one of the brothers does chalitza? It's the same thing. So the halacha is one brother doing chalitza, it knocks out all the zika from all the Yevamos and all the Yevamos. Everything is going to be done. Everything is going to be over. There was a major machloikis between Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish, as we're about to learn right now. This is one of the key sugyas in Masechtas Yevamos, with regards to what happens in the event that chalitza was done. So we're not talking about Yibum now. We're talking about chalitza, focused specifically and exclusively on chalitza. So one of the brothers did chalitza. What happens now to all these other Yevamos? What happens even to the chalutza? Specifically, what happens to the Eshes Ach? Right? It's interesting. Because when Reuven died, and Reuven left over 3 wives, so these Yevamos, even though they were Eshes Achs, but there was a heter Eshes Ach. There was a zika, there was all the dinim of Yevamos, which mitzvasei the kach is matter the iser Eshes Ach. Now, a chalitza was done. Once the chalitza was done, so now all of a sudden, there's no yibum anymore, there's no chalitza anymore, now everybody goes home. There's nothing anymore to do. The sugya is closed, it's over, there's nothing else to talk about. What happens to the Eshes Ach? Does the Eshes Ach come back? Does the Eshes Ach remain? Is there a difference between the chalutza and the other Yevamos? Right, this is mamish a very, very elementary question in the world of Yevamos. Pasha, what happens to the Eshes Ach after the chalitza happens? It was a machlokes between Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish. Now, one thing is clear. As it relates to the chalutza, the woman that received the chalitza and the choletz, the Yavam himself that did the chalitza, there's going to be no Isser Eshes Ach between the two. So the Yavam that did the chalitza and the woman that received the chalitza, between the two of them, there's going to be no Isser Eshes Ach. Does that mean they can get married after the chalitza? The answer is no. In fact, it's a chayvi lavan. There's a loisase. It says in the Torah, the niksha yevimtoi elav le'enei askena. We're describing chalitza. The chotza nalu me'al ragloi. The yarka b'fanav, she's going to spin in front of him. The ansa v'amran, she's going to say, kacha yeyasa lo ish. Asher lo yivne es beis achim. That this is what you're supposed to do to a person. Asher lo yivne beis achim. Chazal will bother. Asher lo yivne beis achim. He's not in the future going to build beis achim. Asher lo yibona beis achim. Asher einoi boina beis achim. Why is it Asher lo yivne in the future? So the Gemara learns from here that kivan shelo yibona shuv lo yivne. We learn Allah that once someone does chalitza and he wasn't boina, he didn't build the house of his brother. Like the Ramban says, once a person doesn't do yibum, at that point shuv yivna, he has no right anymore to go ahead and to be boina. So kivan shaloi bana, once he wasn't boina, shuv yivna. Say Chazal that you know what the Torah just did? The Torah just said that all it is a chayv ilana. Because if there's an Isser Eshes Ach after you do chalitza, so why would the Torah have to tell me kivan shaloi bana shuv yivna? This is an Isser Eshes Ach. What do I need the chayv ilavan for? There's a chayv krisis. The Torah says there's no chayv ilavan anymore. Because there's no chayv ilavan, what there's going to be is there's no chayv krisis anymore, and because there's no chayv krisis, therefore the Torah had to tell me that there's going to be a lot. So that's true for the Yavam that did chalitza and for the woman that received chalitza. The question is, what about everybody else? And that was machlokes. Rabbi Yochanan held that once there's chalitza done, the halacha is that all the Yevamos and all the Yevamin no longer have an Isser Eshes Ach. All they have is the loisase of kivan shaloi bana shuv yivna. Rish Lakish says no, that no Isser Eshes Ach only falls off between the choletz and the chalutza. But as it relates to the other brothers, or as it relates to the other Yevamos, that Isser Eshazach is going to be Chayzer V'Neir. It's going to return. It's going to come back. And the halacha is at that point, if there's going to be a Be'ila, it's going to be a Chayve Krisos, it's going to be a regular Eshazach. So with that introduction, which is really the majority of the rest of the Gemara that we're about to learn, we almost spoke out the whole Gemara, says the Gemara, according to Levi, who listed a 16th Erva in his Mishnah. What was the 16th Erva? Anus Asav. And we said that Anus Asav really only works if you're willing to accept that the Mishnah is even going to be talking about a case where Ruvain, who's the Achanes, was married to a woman that he wasn't supposed to marry. Where did the Gemara say it? Because we proved from the Mishnah on Daf Yud Gimel Amud Aleph that really who's the Tana of the Mishnah? The Tana of the Mishnah is Rabbi Yehuda. That means the Mishnah on Daf Beis also has to be Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda holds Ein Adam Noise Anus Asaviv. So how would it be possible to have Anus Asaviv in the Mishnah if really Ein Adam Noise Anus Asaviv? In the Teretz is it'd be possible to eat. So according to Levi that holds the Inamik Tani, listen, you have another erva. If someone's Chaylos Yevinta, somebody did Chalisa to Yevamos, because of the Kitcha, and then afterwards he married her. Now he wasn't allowed to marry her. Why not? Once a Yavam does chalitza to the Yevama, so kivin shaloi bana shuvla yivna. But he married her anyways. I wasn't allowed to. We know he wasn't allowed to. It was the E. He went ahead and he married someone that really wasn't supposed to marry. And now he dies. So you know what the halacha should be? The migu di asura. Being that she herself is going to be aser, so the halacha is that the tzara should be aser as well. So Ruvain, Shimon, and Levi. Ruvain was married, he died, he left over no children. Shimon and Levi now had a mitzvah to do Yibum and Chalitza. Shimon went, and Shimon did Chalitza. After Shimon did Chalitza, Shimon died. Now Shimon left over 2 wives. He left over the Chalutza, the woman that was Ruvain's wife that he had done Chalitza on. He also left over another one. Ordinarily, when Shimon dies, his wives fully yibum to Levi. You know what the problem is the chalutza of Shimon, the wife that was the erva that was the Eshazach to Ruvain. She, as soon as Shimon did chalitza, became an Eshazach again to Levi, even before Shimon married her. So it comes out when Shimon married her, Shimon was marrying a woman that to him was a chayve lavim, because he's the one that did the chalitza, but at the same time, to Levi was an eshesach. Being that now Shimon dies. When Shimon dies, he leaves over 2 Yevamos. One is a woman that's his Yevama, but was also Ruvain's Yevama. The other one was only Shimon's wife. Now, the wife that was also Ruvain's Yevama can't become mutter liyibum when Shimon dies. The reason she can't become mutter liyibum when Shimon dies is because Shimon's death can be matter his Eshazach, but can't be matter Ruvain's Eshazach. And she's an Eshazach mitzad Ruvain, because as soon as the Chalitza was done between Shimon and this woman, the Isser Eshazach came back. So right now Shimon died, he left over 2 wives. One of the wives has 2 Isser Eshazach, so to speak. The other one has just 1 Eshazach. Which one has 2? The one that was once Ruvain's wife. Why is it a double Eshazach to Levi? Because as soon as Shimon did Chalitza, the Isser Eshazach of Ruvain came back without the heter of Yibum, and now she has Shimon's Eshazach also. There's another woman that only has Shimon's Eshazach. Shimon's Eshazach can go away, but Ruvain's Eshazach can't go away. If that's the case, it's an Eshazach Shaloi B'Makom Mitzvah. Eshazach Shaloi B'Makom Mitzvah is Dachan Erva, like Eshazach Shaloi B'Yolama is an Erva. So if that's the case, fake Rish Lakish to Rabbi Yochanan, I have another Hechatimtza. It could have said a 16th case. What was the case? Where Shimon married his Chalutza, then he died with no children. The halacha is Shimon's Chalutza, because she was once Ruvain's wife without the heter of Yibam, because the Isra Eshazach, which is usually mutter, came back after the Chalitza, is now going to be an Eshazach Shaloi B'Makom Mitzvah Klapi Levi. There's another wife, it's going to pater the Tzara. Now, if you hold the Eloi Katani, like Rebbe held the Eloi Katani, so that's why I wasn't mentioning the Mishnah. That's partial why when I'm mentioning it. The reason when I'm mentioning this, because it's only possible if Shimon goes and he marries a woman that he's not allowed to marry. Because his Chalutza, even though she's not an Eshazach, but there's a Chayvei Lav and Kivin Shaloi B'Makom But the kasha was the Levi, the Omar, the Inami Ktani. But Levi that would mention, he held that even according to Rabbi Yehuda, you're not allowed to marry Nusasav, but Nusasav is one of the rights mentioned in the Mishnah. So obviously holds the Ikatani Ayin Rashi, who explains it. So if that's the case, even the Ikatani, so why wouldn't you mention this as well? So who asked this question? Rish Lakish asked this question to Rabbi Yochanan. The names are very, very important in this Gemara. Amalei Rabbi Yochanan told Rish Lakish, I'll tell you the teretz. You want to know why it wasn't mentioned? Because it's not possible for this situation to end up being a tzara sar. What does that mean? It's true that Ruvain's Yevama, who was Shimon's chalutza, is an erva. An erva shaloi b'makom mitzvah, machmas the esha sach of Ruvain, which would then make Shimon's other wife a tzara sar. So that's true. You have a case of a 16th erva that's poichois tzara seim, but it's not poichois tzara seim. The reason is because there's no other brother that can go ahead and marry the tzaras erva. Because just like Shimon's other wife is a tzaras erva to Levi, if there was a Yehuda or a Yisachar Zvulun like we had in yesterday's daf, or you can throw in any other brother, he would have the same exact problem. It would be the same tzaras erva. And just like the Gemara said on daf Gimel Amud Beis, that the Mishnah didn't mention tzaras soita and tzaras islanders, even though these are arayas that are poichos saraseyim, because it's Eina B'tzara Sarah. It's for that reason Rabbi Yochanan told Rish Lakish the Mishnah didn't mention your case because it's Eina B'tzara Sarah. Geshmaka Kasha and a Geshmaka Teretz. Break the Gemara, Rabbi Yochanan, why was that the Teretz that you gave? Rabbi Yochanan could have said a better Teretz. Why did Rabbi Yochanan tell them Chayvi Lavani? The Chayvi Lavin B'nei Chalitza V'yibim Nino. Now, who's this Rabbi Yochanan? We mentioned it briefly in the introduction. We're going to see it in a moment inside the Gemara. But Rabbi Yochanan, we said earlier, argues with Rish Lakish. Rabbi Yochanan holds that once one Yavam does Chalitza, so then the halach is the Isra Eshesach falls off of all the Yavamim and it falls off of all the Yavamis. So just like the Choyleitz and the Chalutza is going to be a Kivan Shalaybana Shuvla Yivna, all it's going to be is a Chayvei Lavim, the same is going to be true for all the brothers and for all the Yavamis. If that's the case, she's not an Eshesach Shaloi B'Makom Mitzvah. Because once Shimon did Chalitza with Ruvain's Yevama, so now the Yevama became a Chayvei Lavin to Shimon, and also a Chayvei Lavin to Levi and Yehuda and to all the other brothers. So all she is a Chayvei Lavin. If all she is a Chayvei Lavin, so she's not an ever, she's not an ever. She's not going to pot the tzara. So Rabbi Yochanan knocked it out with a technicality, right? He said it trips up on a technicality. What's the technicality? It's Eina B'tzara Sar. Forget about Eina B'tzara Sar. It's dead on arrival. It doesn't even start. She's an erva. You're assuming she's an erva. Why? Oh, Rish Lakish L'shitasa, who holds it's only the Chaylos and the Chalutza that have the Chayvei Lavin, but everybody else is really the Chayvei Krisis. It's an Eshesach. That's good. But according to Rabbi Yochanan L'shitasa, again, if it was someone else that answered the question, if Rabbi Avon was the one that answered the question, Rabbi Lazar, nobody would have a problem. But it was Rabbi Yochanan that answered the question. So why did Rabbi Yochanan say it? So the Gemara says a Pashta Teretz, L'dvarav Kamaleh. He was talking to Rish Lakish. He said, according to me, Rish Lakish, you know the question doesn't start. Because Chayvei Lavin, the Chayvei Lavin, B'nei Chalitza V'yibim Ninu. Once it's a Chayvei Lavin is B'nei Chalitza V'yibim, and all it is a Chayvei Lavin. Elo L'didach. You mean the question L'shitascha? Chayvei Krisis Ninu? I hear, of the future Eina B'tzara Sarah. I mean that it's Eina B'tzara Sarah. It's for that reason it's not going to be a problem. So we just mentioned the machloikas between Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish regarding someone that does chalitza. Right, we went a little bit backwards. Once we see Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish, then if you look back at the Gemara on the top of the Yomim, it's going to be very, very geshmak. But we were going in order. Really, we're not up to talking about Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish. We're discussing the Chamesha Srei why not 16, Levi's kasha, Rish Lakish's kasha. Rish Lakish's question was predicated on a machloikas Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish. So the Gemara now is going to present that machloikis between Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish. Someone does chalitza to Yevamos, the chaz of a kitcha, and then he marries her again. I'm Rish Lakish. Rish Lakish says when he chayiv ala chalitza cars, he's not chayiv cars because once you do chalitza, there's no way shesach. There's no way shesach if you want to do yibum, and if you do chalitza, the shesach remains gone. Therefore, there's no chayiv cars. However, the other brothers that didn't do chalitza, if they're boil the chalutza, chayav and al chalutza cars. Not just that, Atzara, if anyone is going to be boiled, the Tzara, meaning the other Yevama that didn't have the Chalitza done to her, Bein Hu, Bein Achin, doesn't matter if it's the Chayletz or it's one of the brothers, Chayav and Atzara Karas, everyone's going to be Chayav Karas. Yochanan argues, he holds that once Chalitza is done, Bein Hu, U Bein Achin, once this Chalitza that all the Yevamim and all the Yevamis, doesn't matter who it is, there's no Eishes Ach. My time, the Rish Lakish, where it says, why is Rish Lakish hold that when it comes to the Cholitz and the Chalutza, there's no chorus? The pasuk says Ashelo Yivna, and we learn from there Kivin Shalaybana Shavla Yivna. That's the loisa that we mentioned. Says the Gemara, Iyu who the Kaibel Yivna. He's the one that did the Yivna, meaning he's the one that did the Chalitza. It's regarding him that we say Kocha Yeyasa Loish Ashelo Yivna is based Achid. It's not him. Abel Achid Kidikaimi Kaimi. It's regarding the brothers. They never did anything. No one ever screamed with regards to the brothers. So there's no Yivna. And Vala Dida who the Kaibel Yivna. It's only her. You didn't do Yibam on her. She's the one you did Chalitza. So regarding her, there's going to be a Chayv Yilab. Not sorry, but as it relates to the Tzaris, it's not going to be the case. Where's Rabbi Yechanan? So why is Rabbi Yechanan, once there's a Chalitza done, that all the Yavam and all the Yavamas can have this halacha? Because Rabbi Yechanan held, Miyak and Midi, the Mikari boy high cholitz, we boy high cholitz. If you buy the high cholitz, we buy the high cholitz. The Ashta Koya, love Karis, doesn't make sense. As soon as the Yavam is fully Yibam, there's no Eishasach. Now you did Chalitza, and the Chalitza brought back the Eishasach. How does the Chalitza bring back the Eishasach? Must be, there's no Eishasach. What is it? There's a Chayv Yelaven. Where's the Chayv Yelaven? Where's the Kivin Shalaybana Shuvla Yivna? Bishlam the Chayleitz and this Chalutza here. But where's it for everybody else? Ella says Rabbi Yochanan, one of the most important lines in Yevamos. Iyu shlichusa da achim ka'avta. And ihi shlichusa da tzara ka'avta. Says Rabbi Yochanan that you want to know how Yibum works. The one brother that does chalitza is acting as an agent. He's acting as a shliach of the other brothers. And the one Yevama that receives the chalitza, she's acting as a shliach, as an agent of the other Yevamos. So it's true, one Yavam, one Yevama, one chalitz, one chalutza. But at the end of the day, shluchay shalom kamaisa, it works with dinei shlichos. And if it works with dinei shlichos, it's not just one brother that did chalitza, all the brothers that did chalitza. And it's not just one Yevama that received the chalitza, all the Yevamas received the chalitza. So we can very accurately say regarding all of these brothers and sisters that kacha yeyasa lo ish, asher lo yivne, as base often, and that's where Rabbi Yechanan holds that regarding all of them, no karas because the karas is gone. How's it coming back? And regarding all of them, you're going to have the lav of Kivan Shalaybana Shuvla Yivna. Incidentally, is this lav of Kivan Shalaybana Shuvla Yivna a legitimate lav? Like it's a real loisase? So if you look in the Rambam in Sefer HaMitzvahs, Rambam doesn't mention it. It's not mentioned anywhere in the Rambam Sefer HaMitzvahs, stating that the Ramban, in the end of the Rambam Sefer HaMitzvahs, so he has a whole list of mitzvahs that he believes that the Rambam left out. It's called the Shikchas HaEsen and the Shikchas HaLavin. The Shikchas HaEsen are the Esen that the Ramban believed the Rambam omitted, and the Shikchas HaLavin are the ones that were the Lavin that he believed the Rambam omitted. Mitzvah Yud Dalet in Shikchas HaLavin is this loisase. Ramban says the Rambam didn't mention anywhere in the Sefer HaMitzvahs the lav that once a person does chalitza, and of course we pass him like Rabbi Yochanan, so all the Yevamin and all the Yevamos are going to be now a chayvei lavin of Kivin Shalaybana Shuvla Yivna. It's not mentioned anywhere in the Rambam. The Ramban says it's pashut, it's a regular loisase in the Torah. It's another lav that we have here in the mitzvah of Yibum. You have the mitzvah saseh, Yevama Yavi, a little bit of Reid, the man's mitzvahs, and also the woman's mitzvah. You have, of course, the loisase of loisia isha sameis achutza leishzar. You have chalitza. Is chalitza a mitzvah or not? So we didn't even get into that. It's a whole parak called mitzvahs chalitza. It certainly sounds like it's a mitzvah, but we have another loisase that's included and tucked away in the parish of Yibum, which the Ramban counted in his Taryag mitzvahs. And that's this lav of Kivan Shalaybana Shuv Lo Yivna. So just one ha'ara, one Reid bite, as it relates to not so much today's daf, but really yesterday's daf and the day before's daf and tomorrow's daf. And it's really a ha'ara that touches on some of the lumdis and it gets involved in some of the gemaras and the dinim that we are going to learn together be'ezus Hashem here in Masechtas Yevamos. It's mavur in many places in Masechtas Yevamos that according to Rabbi Akiva that holds that kedushin is not toifes the chayvei lavin. If a chayvei lavin falls liyibum, the halach is going to be that there's going to be no yibum and there's going to be no chalitza. What does this mean? So we have to take a step back and we have to reacquaint ourselves, because it's been many years, to the machlokes between Rabbi Akiva and the Chachamim as it relates to when we say that if a man tries to marry a woman, that's Moshe of Yisrael, that he's not really allowed to marry, that the kedushin is toifus, and when we say that the halach is that the kedushin is not toifus. So the halach is like this: there are many, many women that a man is not allowed to marry, stating that if he would marry her, b'di'evet, the kedushin would be chal. What does it mean the kedushin's chal? If she wants to get married to somebody else, she can't. She's an Eishes Ish. She would have to have a get. If the man dies and leaves over no children, she would fall a yibum. The only time that if someone marries someone that he's not allowed to marry, we say the kedushin is not toifus, is in the event that this woman is an erfa. She's a chayve krisos. The halacha is kedushin is not toifus, the chayve krisos. That's the halacha. So if somebody tries to marry his sister, his daughter, im chamoisoi, any one of the arayas, the halacha is the kedushin is not toifus. Not only is the kedushin not toifus, in the event that there would be a bia and they would have a child, the child would be a mamzer. But this is true not for all these surei bia. It's only true for chayve krisos. Stating that there's a das yachid in Shas. It's the sheet of the Heilige Tanner of Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva held that just like kedushin is not toifus by chayve krisos, and just like if someone engages in bia with the chayve krisos and fathers a child, that child is going to be a mamzer. The same is true, says Rabbi Akiva, for chayve lavin. Rabbi Akiva's shita is that kedushin is not toifus b'chayve lavin. Rabbi Akiva's shita is that if someone has a child through a chayve lavin, the child is going to be a mamzer. In other words, very, very superficially, Rabbi Akiva seemed to equate a chayve lavin to a chayve krisos. And just like the Chacham hold chayve krisos, kedushin is not toifus, chayve krisos, the child is going to be a mamzer. In Rabbi Akiva's world, the same is true even for a chayve lavin, certainly for a chayve krisos. But the same is going to be true for a chayve lavin as well. It's with that introduction that we can understand why the Gemara says that according to Rabbi Akiva, if a chayve lavin would fall yibum, let's just pick one example of a chayve lavin. A grusha fell yibum to a kohen heder. So there's Reuven and Shimon are brothers. They're also kohanim, and Reuven is married to a grusha, and now this grusha is falling yibum to Shimon. Reuven was never allowed to be married to the grusha. That was not okay. Shimon now is really not allowed to be married to a grusha either. But the bottom line is that the halacha is if the chayve lavin falls yibum, according to the Chachamim, you can't do yibum, but you do chalitza. According to Rabbi Akiva, that a chayve lavin is treated like a chayve krisos, so the halacha is going to be that there's going to be no yibum and there's going to be no chalitza. This is something that the Gemara mentioned on the bottom of the Amud Aleph. This is something that's axiomatic throughout the entire Masechtas Yevamos, that according to Rabbi Akiva, that kedusha is not toifus b'chayve lavin. According to Rabbi Akiva, that if someone's boiled a chayve lavin, the vlad's going to be a mamzer. Hadar dina that a chayve lavin is like a chayve krisos, and just like a chayve krisos is patam and a chalitza and a yibum at soifa olam, so too the same is going to be true that a chayve lavin is going to be patam and a chalitza, and a chayve lavin is going to be patam and a yibum. Frei Tosfos on the bottom of the Amud Aleph, a bombakash. Frei Tosfos, I don't understand. It's true that Rabbi Akiva holds that a chayve lavin is like a chayve krisos. Stating that, it was mavur in the beginning of the Masechta that if asay would be doicha lois asay sheyesh by kares, then without a pasuk of aleha, we would assume that you could do yibum on a chayve krisos, right? The Gemara on Daf Gimel Amud Beis brought a brayso. There's no yibum and there's no chalitza by an Arab. Why is there no yibum and chalitza by an Arab? Because it says alel and it says alel, and we learn that from the drush of alel that there's no yibum and there's no chalitza when it comes to a chayve krisos. Frey the Gemara, time of the Kosav Rachman Olel. Halaf had it not. I said Olel. I would have thought that there would be yibum by a chayve krisos. How could it be yibum by a chayve krisos? Yibum's an asay. Chayve krisos is a lois asay sheyesh by kares. The in asay doicha lois asay sheyesh by kares. And the Gemara went through Daf Gimel Amud Beis, Daf Daled, Daf Hey, Daf Vav, Daf Zayin into Daf Ches to answer this gross akash. Meaning, it's before in the Gemara. Bishloim, if I say would be doicha lois asay sheyesh by kares, I would understand why I need allowed to tell me that there's no yibum the chalitza by an error. But being that I say is not doicha lois asay sheyesh by kares, so l'chura I shouldn't need a pasuk. So why do I need allow? And the Gemara to come on to reasons. The bottom line is, it was mavur in the Gemara that if I say would be doicha lois asay sheyesh by kares, the halacha is it would be nitzad asvara. You would think there should be yibum by a chayve krisos, and it would certainly explain why we needed allow to tell me that l'fi ha'emes there's no yibum by a chayve krisos. Because if that's the case, Frei Tosfos v'teim l'ri. Rabbi Akiva's chayve lavin, even though he holds that chayve lavin is like tafsi b'kedushin, and even though he holds that a child that's born from a chayve lavin is going to be a mamzer, but at the end of the day, all it is a chayve lavin, and the halacha is asay doicha lois asay. Even Rabbi Akiva agrees that Asay is Doichel Lois Asay, despite the fact Rabbi Akiva seemed to have really upgraded what a Chayvi Lavan is in our eyes. But at the same time, he agrees that there's something called Asay Doichel Lois Asay. It's very Toisakasha. Who cares that Rabbi Akiva holds Kedusha not Toifas B'Chayvi Lavan? And why does it matter that Rabbi Akiva holds that if someone's boil a Chayvi Lavan, the blood's going to be a mamzer? That's the reason there should be no Yibam B'Chalitza. It's before the Gemara that a Chayvi Kris is Gufa. If I say would have been Doichel Lois Asay Sheish B'Garis, would have had no Yibam, would have had Yibam and Chalitza. So according to Rabbi Akiva, Chayvi Lavan is like a Chayvi Kris. It's Beseder. But at the end of the day, I say it's Doichel Chayvi Lavan. So if I say it's Doichel Chayvi Lavan, Yomi, I say the Yibam Yavayala, and it should be Doichel the Chayvi Lavan. And if that's the case, there should be Yibam. It's very Toisfis. Why does it matter that Chayvi Lavan is like Chayvi Krisos? Not Niach, it's like a Chayvi Krisos. Let's make that hanacha. Let's take that leap of faith. But at the end of the day, I have an essay Doichel Lois Asay. And just like Rabbi Akiv, just like the Chachamim, it's before, that even by a Chayvi Krisos, if I say it was Doichel Lois Asay, Sheish by Karas, the halach is there would be Yibum. Because you would say, I say Doichel Lois Asay, Sheish by Karas, Hagam, it's not Hafsi Kedusha by a Chayvi Krisos. Hagam, there's a blood mamza by a Chayvi Krisos. But at the end of the day, because of Asay Doichel Lois Asay, you would say that there's a mitzvah of Yibum. So if that's the case, according to Rabbi Akiva, Chayve Lavin, where you have Asay Doichel Lois Asay, the halacha should be that there should be Yibum. Why is it before throughout Yevamos that there's no mitzvah of Yibum by a Chayve Lavin according to Rabbi Akiva? That's Tois's Kasha, and Tois's bleibt Sorachim. The Avni Melur, the Baal K'tzois HaChoshen, in Simin Yud Ches of Cotton Aleph, says a teretz nifla to Tois's Kasha. But before he answers this Tois's Kasha, we have to introduce another Tois's Kasha. And that Tois's, again, is a big yisoid on the Ches Amud Beis. So the Gemara over there brought the Josh of Rebbe. Rebbe didn't learn the halacha of Tzaras Erva from Litzor, but rather Rebbe learned the halacha of Tzaras Erva from Ulukacha Le'isha V'yivma. Ulukacha V'yivma to teach me the halacha of Tzaras Erva. The Gemara asked the Kasha, according to the Chacham, they learned Tzaras Erva from Litzor. So what do they do with the Lukacha Le'isha V'yivma? So the Gemara says, you want to know what the Chacham darsha from Lukacha, Malamich and Megarsha to get the Machzir. Meaning, what would be if a man did Yibum, and then after he did Yibum, he divorced his wife. Now he wants to remarry his wife. Is he allowed to remarry his wife, or is he not allowed to? Lukacha teaches me Shemegarsha to get Machzira, that if he wants to remarry her, he's allowed to remarry her. Why is it a Chiddush? The reason it's a Chiddush is because we could have had a Havamina. That it's true when a person does Yibum, even though technically the Yevamos is an Eishasach, but Yevamos lets us look away from the Eishasach. But that only helps us as long as they're married. But once they're not married anymore, once they get divorced, so at that point, maybe the Isser Eishasach would come back. And if the Isser Eishasach would come back, so maybe he wouldn't be able to marry her back. Because at this point, she's going to be an erva, shloi b'makar mitzvah. So I need a l'kacha loy l'isha to teach me, shemagash to get a machzira, that the Isser Eishasach does not come back, that it's going to be mutter. In other words, without a pasuk, there would have been a havamina, that maybe after the Yibum, the Eishasach comes back. When? After the Gerushin. So that maybe if you megarish her, you're not letting marry her back. Kamash Malan, Lukacha Leisha, she's a regular wife. And just like a wife, if you divorce her, you have a right to marry her back. You can be Machzir Rushal. So too, this woman, this Yevamo, megarish her to get the Machzir. Fake Toys a Gavaldig Kash. If the Gemara had a Havamina, that even though there's a Heter Eishasach by Yibum, but maybe the Heter Eishasach is only B'Makam Yibum, but once the Yibum passes, at that point, there's no Heter Eishasach anymore. And therefore, there would have been a Havamina that once this man divorces his wife, if he divorces his wife, this Eishasach comes back. So it says Tosfos. So why is the Gemara saying, I only need a L'kachaloi L'ishol, the Yibma, to teach me that you can marry her back if you divorce her? That you can be Machzir Rushasa. Say much better. Say that without a L'kachaloi L'isha, I would have thought that after the Bia Rishayna, at that point, it should be Asa. Why? Because the mitzvah's yibum is only the first bia. After the first bia, there's no mitzvah's yibum anymore. So how do I know the mitzvah's yibum is only the first bia? Maybe the second bia there's also a mitzvah. I know it because the Gemara says, according to the Chachamim, why can't you do yibum? Why can't you do yibum by a chayv labim? Say I say deichel lois. I say, and what was the Gemara's teretz? Because they were being rishon to be a shneya. Because it's only the being rishon where you're going to have the essay. On the being shneya, you're not going to have the essay anymore. So you see that the mitzvah of yibum is only the being rishon. So if there's a havamina that the ishasach comes back, so then l'chayra, the Gemara should have said better that I need a l'chachaloi the isha to teach me that there's a heter be a shneya. Because without that, maybe I would have thought there's a mitzvah's yibum. Once the mitzvah's yibum passes, at that point, the Israel Shesach comes back. Why is the Chiddush and why is the Havamina only that the Isra Shesach would come back after he divorces his wife? What does divorcing his wife have to do with anything? It's once the mitzvah's yibum passes. The mitzvah's yibum passes after the first biyah. It's fake Tosfos. He doesn't understand. The table. I don't understand this Gemara. If the Gemara has a Havamina that the Shesach comes back, then the Havamina should be that it comes back not the biyah Rishonah. So I should need a pasuk already for the biyah Shniyah. And it's before the Gemara. You don't need a pasuk for the biyah Shniyah. You only need a pasuk if you want to be machzir Rushasik. Fake Tosfos the I don't understand why. So Tosfos says a teretz. Tosfos says that Biyah Shniya loitzrich akra. You know why? It's svar. It's logical because it's not mistaber that the Torah would tell a person, "Go ahead, do a biyah," and then afterwards the ishus is over. It's not mistaber. It's just not mistaber. That would be the mitzvah of yibum. Can't be. So it must be that when the Torah gave a mitzvah of yibum, the Torah meant get married and stay married. And even though really it's only the biyah rishonah that's a mitzvah, but it's just not possible. It's in meglach that's the mitzvah of Torah. This is inconsistent with everything in the Torah, with all dvarim of kedusha. It's not possible, but that's what the Torah wants. The Torah wants you to do just one ma'aseh biyah, and that's it. So it must be that when the Torah said Yevamos Yavar, it means you get married, and it's chal nishus, which is of course what Yibum is. It's a nishus, not just a biyah, it's a nishus. So it's chal nishus. Now, if he divorces his wife, that's already a whole other story. So you want to know if he can remarry her? I don't know. For that, I need a pasuk to teach me that my guy should get a machzir. But to tell me that I need a pasuk for a biyah shniya, that's not true. You certainly wouldn't need a pasuk for a biyah shniya. That's Tosfos teretz. Zocht Avnei Meluim in this piece in Yud Ches Aleph that Tosfos said a teretz in Svar. Tosfos said a quote unquote balabatish teretz. But Zocht Avnei Meluim, I think the teretz is much sharper. I think the teretz is much more yesodistic. That is, there's a Gemara later, Masechtas Yevamos, Daf Mem Tes. The Gemara there is discussing the halacha, how a mamzer can be born. So where does the mamzer come from? A mamzer comes from a bias isser of chayvi krisos. So if someone's boy with chayvi krisos has a child, that child is a mamzer. The Gemara says, stating that, hakol moedim, everybody agrees, the bala nida, that if someone's boy nida and has a child, the child is not a mamzer. Meaning, if a child is born from a nida, the child is not a mamzer. It's a chayvi krisos. How come nida that the child is not a mamzer? The Gemara says, why not? The reason is because it's tafsi ba kedusha. Because if somebody between the kaddish and nida, the kedusha would be typhus. In other words, the Gemara is saying that the only time a child is a mamzer, and the only reason the child is a mamzer, is because if the man and woman would have tried to have gotten married, the kedusha wouldn't be typhus. However, in the event the kedusha is typhus, even if it's a chayvi krisos, the halacha is that that child is not going to be a mamzer. Therefore, being that if someone's mekadesh and nida, the child's not a mamzer. So zok the Gemara, hakamaydim bebala nida, that the vlad is not going to be a mamzer. Zok Rashi, how do you know that if someone's mekadesh and nida, the child, the kedushin's chal? Maybe if someone's mekadesh and nida, it's not chal. Just like all the other arayos, it's not chal. So maybe it's not chal. And if it's not chal, then if someone's bala nida, the child should be a mamzer. So Rashi, it's poshut if someone's mekadesh and nida, the kedushin's chal. You know how I know that? The reason I know that is because what happens when a woman becomes a nida? She stays married. If kedusha wouldn't be typhus on a nida, then when a woman would become a nida, her marriage would be over, and the man would have to be mekadesh her again. From the fact, so Rashi, that when a woman becomes a nida, she stays married. Zoisay meres, nida is not a steer to kedusha. So if nida is not a steer to kedushin, if someone wants to be mekadesh and nida, the kedushin is going to be typhus, and that's pshat in the Gemara. That hakol moedim the bala nida, that the child is not going to be a mamzer. Zok Avnei Meluim. It's mevur in this Gemara in Yevamos Daf Mem Tes Amud Beis and in Shitas Rashi, the way he explains the Gemara, that in the event that you had a situation where you were married to someone, and then that woman became a woman that if you tried marrying her, you wouldn't be able to be married. You wouldn't be able to marry her. She'd be a woman that's like tafsik la kedushin. That if that mitzias came about during the marriage, it would be paka the kedushin. That's like Rashi. Rashi says, now I know kedushin's typhus benida because now I know you can be mekadesh a nida. Because if a woman becomes a nida, she doesn't become ois mekudeshes. Meaning, because if it wouldn't be chal kedushin, then if she would become a nida, she would be ois mekudeshes. So what do you see clearly? You see that if there's a woman that you know for sure is like Tafsi Kedusha, like all the Arayas, if a woman would become an Arab in the middle of a marriage, they wouldn't need to get, because that's Moshe and Yisrael. It'd be done. The marriage would be paka. It would be over. Because just like it's not Tafsi Kedusha so to the Paki Kedushin. The two are totally zebezeh, azoy state in Rashi Yevamos, and end the parak achoyles, and Mesachtes Yevamos, some Zeitamo, and that mem tes Amud Beis. Zok da avni meluim, lefize yesh shloimer adoverne. Tais has the kasha. Tais wanted that. Why is it that the heter eshazach is true even for the biyashni? The first biyah, I understand there's a heter eshazach, but the biyashni, why is there a heter eshazach? And even the Gemara, they needed a pasuk to tell me that the eshazach doesn't come back. It was only to tell me that if the Yavam divorces his wife, then it doesn't come back. However, to tell me that after the biyah rishayna, the eshazach doesn't come back, for that we didn't need a pasuk. So you want to know why? I'm going to tell you why. Because if the eshazach would come back after the biyah rishayna, so you know what would happen? Right now she's an eshazach. Eshazach is an erva. You can't be mekadosh an eshazach shaloi b'makom mitzvah. If you can't be mekadosh an eshazach shaloi b'makom mitzvah, if a woman becomes an eshazach shaloi b'makom mitzvah, the kedushin is going to be paka. So essentially, what you're saying is that tema freitosis. What I want is that maybe there should be a mitzvah zivam yavei oleh, and then the eshazach comes back. So essentially, what you're saying is you want there to be a mitzvah yibum. Go ahead and be kind of this woman, do a mitzvah, and then immediately after. It should go away. So that can't happen. You know why? Because there's one more Gemara. There's a Gemara Masechtas Adorim, Daf Chav Tes Amud Aleph. The Gemara says, what happens if a man goes over to a woman and says, Hayoim at ishti, umachar iyat ishti. I want to be married to you today, but nish margi. Hayoim at ishti, umachar iyat ishti. The Gemara says, Eina Mekudeshes. You can't do this. Why not? Soch the Ran in the Dorim, Daf Chav Tes Amud Aleph. He says the reason is because even though you find this concept of a kinyan lazman, Kinyan l'shah, right? You can have something for a certain amount of time. But the way Kinyan l'zman works in Lamdis is it's a Kinyan Paris. You own the pairs, you don't own the go. So if somebody owns the pairs of a field for a year, it's not that he owns the field for that year. He owns the pairs. All it is a Kinyan Paris. Kinyan Ishrus is a Kinyan Aguf. It doesn't have Kinyan Paris. In Shas, we have a Machloikis, Kinyan Paris, Kinyan Aguf, Lavki Kinyan Aguf, Machloik Rebbeich, Mishlokish. There's no such thing as a Kinyan Paris of Ishrus. In Ishrus, either you have a Kinyan or you don't have a Kinyan. It has to be a Kinyan Aguf. And that's why Hayoim at Ishti, Umachar Iyat Ishti is not a Kedushin. Zocht Avim Mum, that's the Paris place Kash. Just ask the kasha that why don't we need a pasuk to tell me that after the Maisa Yibum, after the Biyah Rishayna, that there's a heter eshazach for the Biyah Shnil. If he's saying the Gemara there's a havamina that the Gash Megera Machzira, that I need a pasuk who l'kachal like the Ishus, I should need a pasuk for the Biyah Shnil also, because once the Biyah Rishayna happens, there's no mitzvah anymore. So it couldn't be that way, because if the Isser eshazach would have came back, that means the whole year would be a chuk of a tlula, because it would be a yoyim atishti umachar iyatishti, and a yoyim atishti umachar iyatishti is nishkan ishus. It's a gemara in the Garim Chavtes Amud Aleph, and it's mavur that is not an ishus, and yibum has to be an ishus, not a maisus bia. It's a maisa ishus, and because it's a maisa ishus, you can't have an ishus just for a day. There's no such mitzias, and being that you can't have an ishus just for a day, and it's already. And get back in the midst of Yibum, that as soon as the Biyah, which is the Maisa Ishus happens, it's going to be Paka the Ishus. So it comes out as an Ishus as man. An Ishus as man is this kind of Ishus. If it's not an Ishus, it's not a Yibum. If it's not a Yibum, then it can't be that the Isra Shazach comes back after the Biyah Rishayna. So it's Pashim when it says in the Torah, Yevamos Yovei Yoleh, Machanishus, it must be that it's not going to be, the Isra Shazach is not going to come back. Because if the Isra Shazach is going to come back, that means she's going to be an erva. If she's an erva, it's going to be Paka the Kedushin. How do you know it's going to be Paka the Kedushin? Rashi, Yevamos, Memtes Amud Beis. If it's going to be Paka the Kedushin, that means the whole Kedushin was only Lizman. If the Kedushin was Lizman, it's not a Kedushin. How do I know that? The Ran and the Dorim. Chav Tes Amud Aleph. So it's not possible. At the end of the day, Torah said do an ishus. So if Torah said do an ishus, but it must be that this ishus is an ishus la'olam, and if it's an ishus la'olam, it must be that the Isra Shazach doesn't come back. Because if the Isra Shazach is going to come back, then that means that it's going to be Paka the Kedushin, it's going to be Paka the Kedushin, it's going to be the ishus was never an ishus. Because Hayoim Atishti, Umachar Iyat even for Hayoim, the ishus is not going to be an ishus. Zok T'Ktsois. Zok T'Avim Eluim. That if that's the case, Yesh Shloimeh, that's the Teresa's Kasha in the bottom of Daf Tes Amud Aleph as well. Teresa asked the Kasha, he said the Tema, according to Rabbi Akiva, it's Mavur in the Gemara is that Rabbi Akiva, because he holds that a Chayvi Lav is like a Chayvi Krisos, so it's for that reason there's no Yivam and there's no Chalitza when it comes to a Chayvi Lav. Toisvis, why not? Say Doichalois Asay. And the way all the Achroim, Baruch Ber and Baruch Shmuel, and Maran Agriz and the Briskerov and Sefer, the way that Masbatois Kasha, the way we were Masbatois Kasha. And that is because it's Mavur in the Gemara that if I say would have been Doichalois Asay, Sheich by cars, we wouldn't have cared about Chaybi Krisos. So no, over here I say is Doichalois Asay. So even if Chaybi Rav is like a Chaybi Krisos, we wouldn't have cared about Chaybi Krisos if there was Asay Doichalois Asay. So why should we care about Chaybi Lavin? Tois asked this Kasha, and Tois applied Sarachin. And third, the Avni Meluim, it's true according to Rabbi Akiva, there's an Asay Doichalois Asay. But the Asay Doichalois Asay is only going to work for the Bia Rishon, right? Even the Chachamim hold that Chayvi Lavin is Chayletzes for Loim Nesiyah Be'emes, Zera Bia Rishona, out to Bia Shniyah. So really, it's only going to be from the Bia Rishona that you're going to have Asay Doichalois Asay. What's going to happen for the Bia Shniyah? The Bia Shniyah, at that point, she's going to be a regular Chayvi Lavin. And if she's going to be a regular Chayvi Lavin, and you're not going to have the Tchiyah, if she's going to be a regular Chayvi Lavin, so now it's going to be Paka the Kedushin. You know why it's going to be Paka the Kedushin? Because just like if it be Chal Erev, according to the Chachamim, in the middle of a marriage, the whole marriage would go. So according to Rabbi Akiva, if it's Chal Chayvi Lavin in the middle of the marriage, the whole marriage is going to go. Because those are Rabbi Akiva Shita, that Chayvi Lavin is like a Chayvi Krisos. So it's true for the first beer, you're good. Because the first beer, you have a say Deichalois Asay. Oh, but what's with the zweite beer? The zweite beer, you don't have a say Deichalois Asay. So the zweite beer, it's going to be Hadar Din, and you're going to have the Chayvi Lavin. And even though, just to speak this out, the Ishas Ach doesn't come back, like the Amud Beis said to answer Toisas Kash and Daf Ches on the days, that's the Iker Mitzvah's Yibum. The Iker Mitzvah's Yibum is that the Ishas Ach goes away forever in order to create a Yibum. But to do a Yibum in a case of a Chayvi Lavin, that Chayvi Lavin's coming back. Why wouldn't it come back? Where's it going? There's no mitzvahs yibum that says the Chayvi Lavin goes back. Mitzvahs yibum says Eishazach doesn't come back. But the mitzvahs yibum doesn't say Chayvi Lavin comes back. Who said you have it right? You want to try to figure out, doing all the math and all your cheshbonos and shas, if you can make yibum work by a Chayvi Lavin. You could for the Bia Rishonos of the Tzos. But the Bia Shnia you can't do. Because the Bia Shnia, the Chayvi Lavin is going to come back. And once the Chayvi Lavin comes back, it's Paka the Kedushin. If it's Paka the Kedushin, then it was never a yibum. Because that's why there's no yibum. And there's no chalitza, zok tzais, according to Rabbi Akiva. What's the kasha? Say, I say, that's going to help me for the Bia Rishona. That's not going to help me for the Bia Shnia. And if it's not going to help me for the Bia Shnia, that means the Chayvi Lavin's coming back for the Bia Shnia. And if the Chayvi Lavin's coming back to the Bia Shnia, it comes out, it's going to be Paka the Kedushin. And if it's Paka the Kedushin, that means the Kedushin was never a Kedushin. In this case, the Yibum was never a Yibum. If the Yibum was never a Yibum, that's why it doesn't work. Again, this is a Festa Avni Maluim. This is classic Shabbat classic in the Oigomai Yeshivas. It touches on so many different sugyas that we're just, again, reacquainting ourselves with. So that's Hashem, as we continue moving along and we become more familiar with Rabbi Akiva Shita, and we revisit, that's Hashem, this Tosfos on the bottom of Daf Tes Amud Aleph. By the way, these two Tosfos kashas that we just mentioned, the one on Daf Ches Amud Beis about Bia Shnia, why doesn't this Eishasach come back? And the one on the bottom of Daf Tes Amud Aleph, why couldn't Rabbi Akiva, is there no Yibum Chalitza by Chayvi Lavin? Say, these are very similar to Kivegus kasha that we spoke at the end of Daf Ches. These are not just kashas, but these are maftechos. They're literally shlislach. They're the mafteach to all the lumdus of Masechtas Yevamos. And really, it's from these kashas and others that all the Achronim Reid and all the Birchas Shmuels and all the festive lumdus of Yevamos with the whole aura of Yevamos comes from. It's really these kashas that bring out a lot of these rays. These are very, very important Tosfos. I didn't think we can pass them through. This Avni Meluim is classic. There's a lot to talk about with the Avni Meluim. There's a lot of ha'aras to be ma'arer. The income of Kamil Laharach. As Hashem will revisit this.